Welcome into another episode of Always Talking Ball. Tyler Noe, Lance Barton. It is finally time to preview the team that you either love or hate. One of the most polarizing brands in all of sports, the proudly independent Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And to help us do that is the owner of Irish Breakdown, Bryan Driskell. Bryan, thanks so much for hopping on with us to talk some Irish football today.
I appreciate you guys having me on. I always love talking college football, especially Notre Dame football. So I'm ready to rock and roll, man. Fall camp starts for Notre Dame in 11 days. Can't believe it. It's almost here. So I'm excited.
Yeah, man, we're just right around the corner, Bryan. And again, appreciate you joining us. Like Tyler said, it's an honor to have you on here with us, man, and talk some Irish football. But so Notre Dame, Bryan, obviously, they're one of the best programs in college football. From the outside looking in, though, right now, this seems like the healthiest that this Notre Dame football program has been in a long time under Marcus Freeman. And he's building a great foundation, first off, through the culture that he's building. I always go back and think to Pat Coogan in that Georgia game, that God country and mother Notre Dame. And just the culture that they showed last year, injuries and, overcoming them, just next man up type mentality, the talent acquisition that Marcus Freeman and that staff. I mean, you lose Chad Bowden to USC, bring in Mike Martin. It seems like they're not missing a beat at all. So the recruiting and the talent acquisition through the transfer portal is as good as it's ever been right now. And they don't seem to lose a lot either through the transfer portal. And they're developing that talent. And then one of the most important things, Marcus Freeman is building and reloading his staff around him. People leave like Al Golden and whoever that may be ends up leaving, and he just keeps bringing people in. So is this the healthiest that you've seen the program in your time in a long time, Bryan?
It is. I mean, and I love the things that you talk about health. You talk about all aspects. Do you have a strong staff? Do you have a staff that's bought into the mission at hand? Do you have a coach that's building the proper mission, the proper foundation? Do you have players that are bought into that mission? And also with Notre Dame, an issue has been in the past is the administration bought in to football being great. I mean, people don't realize as outsiders, Lou Holtz did what he did in spite of the administration, who didn't like a lot of things that Lou Holtz was doing. There's been times when you had leadership at Notre Dame was like, yeah, we don't want football getting bigger than the institution. When in reality, it's like, guys, it's always been bigger than the institution. It's just, what kind of coach is gonna lead it? Are they gonna value the things that make Notre Dame unique? The things that, hey, look, don't come here with a 2.3 GPA and an 850 that's can get through the clearinghouse, but he's not going to be successful at Notre Dame. Find us young men that can thrive, and you've got a ton of support. The money is great. Notre Dame just signed a new TV, or they didn't sign a new TV deal. They signed a new apparel deal with Under Armour that gave them more money there, but then they signed an extension with NBC that pays them a lot more money. Plus you've got the ABC money coming in. Jack Swarbrick negotiated a phenomenal deal for Notre Dame if they make the playoff as far as what they get paid. The next deal, from what I've been told, is going to be even better for Notre Dame. So, I mean, in every aspect you look at, it's been good. And, like the admissions department has always been a bit of a stumbling block in the past. They're bought into what's going on at Notre Dame. Not that they've changed the standard, but, here's a small example of the school being bought in. It used to be where they would not look at a transcript till the kid had completed his junior year. Well, now they won't make decisions on accepting players sooner, but what they'll do is they'll look at sophomore transcripts and say, okay, if you want to get in here, you need to do A, B, C, D, and E, which gives kids, 2-3 years to kind of get that done. Where in the past, if a kid's like, hey, you need 3 years of a foreign language or 2 years of a foreign language in these 6 math classes, you're like, well, I can't do that in 2 semesters, and so now it's like, okay, these kids have 2 years plus to kind of get these things figured out and get their academic profile in a place. So it's not changing the standard, but it's giving the football team, working with them to say, hey, we're going to help you find the right kind of kids, and we're going to help make it, if they're willing to do the work, they'll get in. And as long as they reach these certain things. So it's just everybody's bought in. And that's why the health of the program is where it is, because you can lose your starting left tackle. You can lose your All-American D tackle, your starting Viper, your backup Viper, your All-American corner, and go into the playoffs and still beat Georgia, still beat Penn State. And that wasn't possible back in the day. It wasn't that long ago. Notre Dame got on that stage. You're like, okay, it's nice to be here, but let's see how much we're going to lose by in this game, and it's got a bunch of monkeys off their back last year. That's for sure.
Yeah. Let's get to the 2025 team here. Let's start with the offense side of the ball. I've always said that I think this offense, obviously with Riley Leonard being quarterback last year and then transitioning to most likely CJ Carr this year, it's going to look completely different. Like it's just going to be a completely different type of offense with the downfield threat. Obviously, Carr not resorting straight to his legs after the first read's not there. But what's not going to change much is Joe Rudolph's offensive line. I mean, obviously, due to injuries, they started 2024 with a combined 6 starts, and they're entering this year with, I think, 55, around that
53
number.
53 without
53.
Jagasol. Yeah.
So, obviously, tackles, Emil Wagner, Anthony Knapp, like they showed out last year. They started a combined 31 games. Billy Schrouth, Ashton Craig is back. So, obviously, from the time we're recording this to the time it releases, I'm hoping nobody else gets injured because obviously the news broke a couple weeks ago with Charles Jagusaw. And it looks like you can give us an update there. It looks like he should be back at some point during the season. It looks like maybe Sullivan Absher is going to get the nod at right guard right now. So last year, I mean, with the running backs they have, they were solid in the run blocking schemes all year last year. And obviously Riley using his legs. The question is can they improve enough in the pass protection area for that passing attack to make the leap to where, this offense can actually thrive in that passing attack?
Yeah, I do think run game wise, there still is an element to you've got to do better in the big games. And they didn't run block great against Louisville. They didn't run block great against Georgia. They didn't run block great against Penn State and Ohio State. They did run block very well against Texas A&M. I think part of that is because there was no film on the particular players that were in there, and Ohio and Texas A&M was also breaking in some newer guys, Nick Scorton, and first year in the system and things like that. So, I don't know that they necessarily knew what to expect from that Notre Dame offensive line, and so I do think there's that. But that's the big thing is Riley Leonard bailed out that offensive line in a big way a lot of times last year. And you're not going to have that, and you're going to have to improve. That's no question, especially in the bigger moments. And even some of the big plays Riley Leonard made last year. If you go back and watch that 3rd and 9 back shoulder he threw to Jaden Greathouse against Penn State, he got drilled. He didn't even finish his follow through. You look at the big post route he hit to Jordan Faison against Indiana that helped them put that game away and go up 27-3. Again, he got drilled. And so pass pro is going to have to get better. Hopefully continuity will help with that. It's not just that they had 6 new starters, but those 6 starters or those 5 starters with the 6 career starts never got to play much together. By the halftime of the 3rd game of the year, Schrouth is out. Ashton Craig's out for the year. Schrouth eventually comes back. He moves to left guard. They leave Rocco in at right guard. Coogan stays at center. Then they get to the playoff game. Knapp gets hurt right before halftime against Penn State. So you go into the title game with a brand new starting offensive line. That worked out because Jagasol's really good. But, you've got to try to find a way to get continuity. And when you're constantly moving guys around and Billy Strauss starts the season at right guard, moves back to left guard when he gets back from injury, it was just clear that there were communication problems because it wasn't just that like guys were getting beat. I mean, there was some of that at times. Guys were just getting beat, but there are times they're just letting guys run through. I mean, they're running slide protection and allowing 2 run throughs. Like that didn't even happen when I coached at like D3 football. Like we didn't even have that happen with our starters. We'd have that happen with our backups or maybe the first couple weeks of camp, but you don't have that in game 5.
So do you agree with everyone's like kind of opinion? And it's widely held opinion that they're the top offensive line heading into the 2025 season.
I'm not ready to go there, to be honest with you. I think there's a couple. Right now, I have Penn State's ahead of Notre Dame. So, we actually did a top 10 O-line breakdown, and then I had Notre Dame number 2, but it was close between Notre Dame and Texas A&M. If you were going to tell me, like, let's say Lance is like, hold on a second, Brian, I want to argue for Texas A&M. I say, okay, I'm 3. It's not. It's close. Yeah. It's a projection. My thing with Notre Dame is we know what A&M is going to be. Notre Dame, it's more about projecting what I think they're going to be. And the reason I went with Penn State is because they both return a bunch. They were both really good running the football. Penn State went for slightly more yards. Notre Dame went for slightly more yards per carry, aided by the fact you had a quarterback that averaged 5.7 yards per carry. But even the 2 running backs had, I think, about 0.7 more yards per carry. The starters did. Now, Penn State's guys had both over 1,000 yards, but Jeremiah Love was like 0.5 better than Nick Singleton in per carry, 6'9" to 6'4". And then Jadarian Price was almost a full yard ahead of Katron Allen, 6'2" to, I think, 5'2". But Penn State was way better in pass pro last year. Not just sacks allowed, because sacks can be misleading. but also just the number of pressures allowed, the number of hits on the quarterback, and then just consistency. Like, look, guys, as a quarterback, I just need to know that when I drop back, I know what to expect. I know my left tackle's not good, so I can just handle it. Or I know my center struggles with this, so I can just be prepared for it. There just is no consistency last year. And when you look at Penn State compared to Notre Dame, that's where they get the edge for me. Now, having said that, would it shock me if Notre Dame ends up number one? No, it wouldn't. Would it shock me if A&M ends up at number one? No, not really. There's about 4 or 5 offensive lines this year that I really like, but Notre Dame's in there. That's the whole point. I mean, we could spend the next half an hour debating who's 1, 2, 3, or 4, but the point is they should be in the conversation for one of the best. And this is a big year for Joe Rudolph. This year 3 for him. And your 2023 O-line was disappointing despite having a top 5 pick and another second-round pick at right tackle, and a kid at center who transferred to NC State and was an all-conference player. Your 24 offensive line was up and down. You can kind of explain that away with the injuries and things like that, but you're in year 3 now, and it's kind of say, okay, let's put it all together and be number one, first and foremost, a consistent offensive line. And then number 2, if you can then be dominant, that's great, because you guys saw last year, A&M game, for example, how big was that hole that Jeremiah Love needed to get through for that game-winning touchdown? It was like about that big.
Yeah.
That's all these 2 backs need, is about a hole that big. And if you give them a hole about that big, it's going to be a problem for the other team. So my whole thing is just number 1, just do your job. Like, you don't have to be Notre Dame 2017. You don't have to be Notre Dame 2020 for this offense to be elite. You just have to do your job. Just get a body on a body, let the talent take over, and this team is going to be good. So if they do that minimum, this is going to be a really good year. It's kind of like the Clemson O-line from 2018. It wasn't elite. Like, their left tackle was an undrafted free agent. I think their highest drafted offensive lineman was, I think, their left guard, who was like 4th round. They had another guy in the 4th round. But they just did their job week after week, snap after snap. And that's all Notre Dame needs. Anything beyond that, and then you start saying, like, okay, this team could be a problem.
Bryan, let's talk about these trigger men that these big uglies are going to be protecting this year. You got CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie. I know that it's, I guess still a QB competition. They haven't
It is
truly named
It
a
is.
starter. But it seems like that to me that Carr gives them the ability just to open things up a lot more and be more explosive in the downfield vertical passing game. He can stretch the field more in the passing game, and I think he gives Mike Denbrock that extra just layer of things that he probably wants to do more with this offense and stretch the field with this receiver unit that he's got coming back this year. Carr can run. Obviously, he's not the type of runner that Leonard was. We know that. Minchie, very talented dual threat guy, can run more. So you obviously do think this is still a competition. Like, what do you think we're going to see from the quarterback starting out this year for the Irish?
Well, one thing is, and it's funny you bring that up, because I was working I'm going through the season and breaking down all the games again, and I'm going to have a bunch of breakdown videos on my premium website where I'm going to go look at different things. And I loved Riley Leonard. I love what he brought to the table. Well, one of the videos is going to be like how many missed opportunities there were last year. Like, I'm going to show a clip where he went through his reads too quickly and threw a check down that was incomplete, where Jaden Greathouse is like, there's not anyone within 15 yards of him. And not like I start to throw, like, I love this. So fans will do this. You'll see a guy wide open, like, oh, why didn't he throw it there? And you're like, well, go look at the play. When he goes here, that safety stops and drives on the ball. That's why the guy comes open. If he'd have just thrown that route, that safety's right there. I'm talking like just wide open. And there were so many times like that where it just was like, this was there. There was a play against A&M where Bo Collins runs a post corner route, and a burst corner route, and the corner just falls down. And if Riley was reading the play properly, he's stolen that thing over top, and it's a walk-in touchdown. I mean, there's so many plays like that last year. And so those plays are expected to be made more consistently with both CJ and Kenny, because one of the things about Kenny Minchie, which is ironic, is you're describing him as a dual threat quarterback, which I understand because you've actually watched the spring games and you watched him play last year. He has like 300 career yards rushing in high school. He was a thrower. Like, he got brought to Notre Dame because he was a thrower.
He's a guy that throws the football well, but he can.
I mean, that's what you recruited him to do. He got faster at Notre Dame, and I think Kenny was always like really athletic, but he just didn't run. He wasn't a runner. And I think he realized, like, if I'm going to win this thing, I'm going to have to utilize all my skills. And then, of course, playing behind Riley last year, and you said, okay, well, like, look, that's an element that you bring to the table. But when he started running around in last year's spring game, I'm like, okay, that's not something I saw from Kenny breaking down his film in high school. And I think that's what's allowed him to be in this conversation. Because if it was just about passing ability, Kenny's a very underrated thrower, but he's not CJ. He's a very smart kid, but he's not CJ. What makes this a real battle is because he's close enough as a thrower to where the athletic aspect of it, the more that now that he is more willing and able to run and make plays with his legs, that allows this to be closer of a competition. But he can still sling it and he can still throw it. I personally think CJ wins the job. That's just my own prediction. But he's going to have to win it. It's not going to be one where they're going to like lay out the red carpet and have a quarterback battle that's geared towards doing whatever we can to prop up CJ. He's going to have to win it, and Kenny's going to make that harder. I think he's going to, but I've told my listeners at Irish Breakdown, like, guys, I think CJ's going to win it, and I think CJ's special. But if Kenny beats him out, what does that say about how good Kenny Minchie is?
Yeah.
And because CJ's not going to just regress and struggle. And so, but whoever starts it, long-winded way of answering your question, I apologize. It's that part of the game is going to improve. Plus, instead of Bo Cons, who's a nice player for Notre Dame, you're throwing in Malachi Fields there, who's an inch taller, 15 pounds heavier, faster, more proven. You're talking about bringing in Will Pauling, who 2 years ago was a 70-plus catch, 800-yard guy. And people forget this, for Notre Dame's current receivers coach. He played for Mike Brown in 2023 at Wisconsin, and then Mike Brown coached him at Cincinnati. So a lot of times you get these transfers, and it's the first year for a coach. I've got to learn what he does well. I got to learn his strengths and weaknesses, how to coach him, how to reach to him, how to push him, how to do what. Well, he already knows that. He recruited the kid out of high school and coached him all but 1 year, which was last year at Wisconsin, on top of bringing back Great House and Will Pauling, and then, of course, the kid that I would encourage you guys to – a name to remember. I'm going to put this in the back of your mental Rolodex. Eli Raridan at tight end. So the weapons are there. You just got to have a quarterback get the ball where it's supposed to go. And to your point, that's what we're going to see that's going to be a little bit different. And if you can have a pass game that can just make people respect it, you don't need to be Jaden Daniels from 2 years ago. You don't need to be Joe Burrow. Just a pass game that says if you're going to commit to just all your resources of shutting down Love and Price, we're going to make you pay. Because if Notre Dame can do that, how do you defend this offense? Because they still could run the ball last year, even when everybody in the stadium knew what was going on. A&M knew what was happening that last drive. Couldn't stop it.
Georgia.
Right, exactly. Just couldn't stop it. And Georgia did as good a job as anybody for most of the game. But when the game was on the line, Notre Dame was able to do what they needed to do. Imagine if Notre Dame could hit some of those open receivers moving forward and make some of those tougher throws that Riley did a good job of in the postseason when they fell behind. That's what was frustrating for me, is like, dude, that's the guy at Duke I remember. Yeah. That gunslinger, that's the dude I thought you were getting at Notre Dame, the guy that we saw at Duke. Where was that when it was 7-7? Right. And that's what was frustrating. I think that's why missing the spring hurt and the foot injuries and all that kind of stuff. But I still loved Riley Leonard and what he did for this program. I'm not trying to act like, oh, they won in spite of Riley. No, they needed Riley last year because they didn't have that O-line. They didn't have the same kind of receiving core they're going to have this year. But it'll just be nice to see Mike Denbrock be able to call an offense that really fits who he is and what he is. Because if you break down their offense, the first 4 games, they had the first 5 games, then a bye. If you look at their pass game from Stanford on, which was coming out of the bye, very different. Different calls, different concepts, different things, because he finally said, okay, now I know what Riley can do. And he tailored it to Riley's skill set, because that's what good coaches do. And now you're going to see him get to build an offense around a way that's more suited to who I think he wants to be as a play caller.
Yeah, you talked about the guys who are going to catch the rock, obviously. I mean, I think Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, being in the second year in the offense. Obviously, you mentioned Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. I mean, they bring in over 229 combined catches, over 2,800 yards in their career. And you did talk about Eli Raridan. Like, I think people just kind of take for granted the tight end position at Notre Dame is like the next man up. He's going to be drafted in the first or second round. Like, that's just it. I mean, there's just not a lot of talk about him. And you touched on them a little bit, but like just maybe some guys that we're not thinking about. Like we talked about the 4 wide receivers, but like, there's a Cam Williams there. There's Elijah Burris, who looked really good in the spring game.
Micah Gilbert.
Micah Gilbert, yeah. KK Smith. I mean, those guys are – any of those guys see the field a lot and actually just make a pop for this team this year?
I hope so. Because I think the one thing that's still missing, and this is where I think Cam Williams comes into play and where maybe a KK Smith, but I think more so Cam Williams can come into play, is the one thing that's missing is just that pure, okay, I can just run by you. I mean, Malachi Fields is 6'4", 220 with the speed he has, with an almost 40-inch vertical jump. At least that's what Bruce Feldman reported in his Freaks list last year. He had him. And what's interesting, he reported Will Paulding as having a 4.39, but I don't know that he plays that way because Wisconsin never used him that way. So
does anybody in Wisconsin have a 4.39 at all?
Well, I mean, he's fast, and we saw that firsthand. But it's like it's hard to run a 4.39 when you only go.
Ryan, he's solid, man. I know you know that, but like he's solid. I was telling Tyler, like when Notre Dame picked him up, when I saw that, I was like, man, that's a one of those that maybe not steals all the headlines nationally, but that dude 2 years ago when Wisconsin running that dairy raid could actually run it a little bit. Like, he was nasty, bro, at receiver, especially later on in the year when they were slinging it around a little more for Whiskey.
Yeah, like the LSU game, for example. But, like, that's the only game they really let him stretch the field. That's what was kind of frustrating. It's like, where was that all year? And they were doing that, if you look at his, like, average depth of target and all that kind of stuff out of the slot. But like, the tools are there. That's why I tell people, like, he was banged up last year. It was his first year without Mike Brown. The quarterback situation in Wisconsin was a hot mess. Like, this is a kid who had 70 catches for 800 yards, to your point, in the Big Ten. It's not like he was playing in, like, the MAC, and you're hoping it translates, because, like, that's can be an issue. You see all the time these kids that come from G5 levels, and they put up numbers, and then they come to the P5, and they can't do that, like C.J. Daniels at LSU, for example, last year is an example. And some do. Like, I think if Colin Lacey at Louisville doesn't get hurt last year, I think he has a huge – I think that receiving core would be ridiculous. If he didn't get hurt early in the year. Like, I think that'd have been enough. Oh, yeah, exactly. But a lot don't, like, do exactly at the P4 level what they did at the G5 level. This is not that. These are two P4 receivers that produced. It's not like I hope Bo Collins can produce at a higher level than he ever did at Clemson. It's, dude, just do what you did. Like, if all Will Paulding does is what he did 2 years ago, if all Malachi Fields does is repeat the last 2 years, that's a huge receiver upgrade for Notre Dame. Huge.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't need to be Will Fuller from 2015. They don't need to do that. Just be Miles Boykin. Why do I say that? Because that's what Malachi was the last 2 years. Was basically Miles Boykin. 50-plus catches, 800-plus yards. That's exactly what he was.
Well, Brian, I'm not really sure that this unit needs a huge introduction, and I'm not really sure what can be said about him. But we're going to try, man. The running back unit for Notre Dame, one of the best, if not the best. I mean, it's arguable between Penn State and Notre Dame, the best 1-2 punches in the country with Jeremiah Love.
It's definitely arguable. I'll tell you
Brian, as you saw.
Apparently it's not. Apparently it's not. According to your guys'
Twitter that you jumped in the ring with us on. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but also they got two other really solid pieces too, with Aeneas Williams, who really showed his ability to catch the rock out of the backfield those last couple of the semifinals in the national championship game. And I heard you, I believe it was on Crane and Company, talking about this guy. And honestly, this is why we have you on too, man. You know your stuff. I went and looked him up. I just started laughing. I was like, they got this dude I've barely even heard of that is just a freaking monster out of the state of Texas, highly ranked, like top 5 tailback in the country coming out of high school, and Kedron Young, that I think people are going to be introduced to more this year. So just
it's 242.
Yeah. Just talk about this ridiculous group. And I mean, I'll ask the question just to ask it, just so I can hear you answer it. Is this the deepest backfield in the country?
If you frame it that way, yes. Like, I think it's a legitimate debate to say who's the better 1-2 punch. Is it the raw production in the run game and pass game of Penn State's two backs? Because they both rushed for more yards. They also had more catches and receiving yards. Notre Dame's guys had more touchdowns. Or is it the efficiency numbers where the Notre Dame guys were significantly more effective on a per-touch basis because Penn State didn't have a quarterback who had 180 carries for almost 1,000 yards? A legitimate debate to have. I think the Penn State running backs outperformed the Notre Dame running backs in their individual matchup. Now, that is also can be something that can be misleading because you're not playing the same defense. Notre Dame didn't have Abdul Carter and Zane Durant and Deni Dennis Sutton on their defense going against those guys. And it might have looked a little different if they did. Could you imagine Notre Dame last year if they had Deni Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter, and Zane Durant in the postseason?
Yeah.
For a different day. It's the depth that makes Notre Dame different. It's the fact that you can come out of halftime and say, okay, we're going to run the ball up the middle of Jeremiah, and then as soon as we get them thinking we're running it right at him, we're going to motion Aeneas out of the backfield, have him run a sluggo, and throw him the ball. You guys watched the play. Yep. That was designed 100% to go to Aeneas Williams. With your team down 10-3 and the Orange Bowl, the semifinals, you're coming out of halftime saying we're going to run a sluggo to our freshman, quote-unquote, number 3 running back. And then the next play, they run outside zone with him, and he rips it off and gets down inside the 5, and a couple plays later, they tie it up. And then, and he only played because Jabron Payne got hurt last spring. Because Jabron Payne was that guy for Notre Dame 2 years ago. He's back. And then, of course, Kedron Young, who's an absolute tank, and by the way, had more catches for more receiving yards than any other running back in the Blue Gold game. You know, if you go watch, he caught a wheel route from C.J. Carr, a 242-pound running back running a wheel route, catching it on a dime, and coming out of the Blue Gold game. So it's the depth that's the separator for Notre Dame. I think you could say Louisville's 1-2 punch is pretty outstanding. And Isaac Brown is a guy that needs to be in the conversation for top back. He actually was my number 2, slightly ahead of Nicholas Singleton. I'm not going to argue with anybody who wants to say Nicholas Singleton should be 2 or 1. There's just some really good backs in that top 4 that I think are in the conversation, but it's the depth. It's Notre Dame could lose a Jeremiah Love and be like, dude, you're going to be fine. Because Jadarian Price is a 1,000-yard back anywhere else besides Notre Dame. And if you have to go to battle with Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, Jabron Payne, and they've got a freshman who I love from Jersey named Nolan James Jr., you're going to be just fine. There's been years where Notre Dame's starting running back was not as good as their current 3rd, 4th, or 5th running back. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And years where Notre Dame was pretty good. Notre Dame went 11-2 a couple years ago 5 years ago now with Tony Jones Jr. as their leading running back. And I like Tony, but that's a different type of cat than what they've got throughout the depth chart now. And so I think the depth is the piece that separates this team. And you need that to play a 16-game season or 15-game season. You're going to have guys that are banged up. You're going to have guys that go out. Do you have the kind of, horsepower and firepower coming off the bench to say, hey, we can lose a Riley Mills and still beat Penn State, still beat Georgia? And so I laugh when Georgia fans are like, yeah, but we didn't have Carson Beck. And I was like, do I really want to list off all the starters that Notre Dame was missing that game? Like, do you really want to go down that path? But they still won those 2 games because they're not just putting in like former walk-ons, on the field to replace their studs. They're putting in dudes. I mean, A&M saw that first game. Who was the player that broke that game open for Notre Dame? It was Jadarian with the 47-yard touchdown run that got Notre Dame on the board. So, he goes against, I think Jeremiah Love, against Florida State went like 9 for 19, 9 carries, 19 yards. Well, why did Notre Dame still be able to run the ball? Because Jadarian had like 90-some yards on 8 carries. Jeremiah's ripping up USC at 99 yards at halftime, over 90 yards at halftime, gets hurt on the first series of the drive. Jadarian's going into the 3rd quarter with like 2 carries for -1 yards. He ends up with 112. So you can lose a kid like that, and with the playoffs on the line, and put in Jadarian Price, and he rips off a couple 30-yarders, and you led by more in the second half than you did in the first half. Yep. There aren't a lot of teams that can do that. And that's what makes this running back room special. And shout out to Dylan McCullough, who's now at the Raiders, for building it. And now it's up to Jaywan Sider, who ironically left the Penn State. And people say, like, well, he knew. Guys, that's not why he made the decision. He didn't make the decision because he evaluated thinking Penn State's running backs slightly worse than Notre Dame's. That's a life decision, a financial decision. There's a lot of things that go into that. That's a petty Twitter argument. That's not a real argument. Coaches leave jobs all the time where they're leaving behind better players because it's just what's best for their futures. But you also aren't going to leave the job you have if you don't think you're going to a good one. And when you can lose a coach like Dylan McCullough, who I thought is the best running back coach in the business, but replace him with a guy that's got a pretty good proven track record, that's one of those things that goes back to your original point, Lance, is about the health of the program, that you can lose a guy like a Dylan McCullough and replace him with a guy like Jaywan Sider. You can lose a Al Golden and replace him with Chris Ash. And in some cases, you lose a guy like Jared Parker, who goes to Detroit, and you replace him with Mike Denbrock. And so you get upgrades. And that's the sign of a good coach. I love when people will criticize a head coach, like, well, like I've said this, Kirby Smart only won 2 back-to-back titles because he hired Todd Monken. If it's like people look at that like I'm insulting, I'm like, no, that's not an insult, guys. That's part of his job is to hire great coaches, and he hired a great coach and let him run the offense.
Brian,
he wanted to run the offense.
I don't mean to cut you off. I don't mean to cut you off, man, but the Step Brothers.
Your show. You cut me off whenever you want.
The Step Brothers moment where do we just become best friends? That just happened just then, man. Yeah. I've said that many times on this show that, not to get off topic here, but yeah, like it's not a coincidence that Kirby Smart, again, best coach in the game right now, but the 2 back-to-back championships that he won was when he had the best coordinator that he's had while he was there on either side of the ball. When he had Todd Monken.
Yeah.
And
But Lance, people take that as an insult. I'm like, no, that's a very important part of a coach's job is to make great hires. This isn't the 1980s when Lou Holtz was calling the offense and there were games in the late 80s and early 90s. Well, actually it was 90s because it was after Barry Alvarez left where Lou Holtz would get pissed off about the defensive coordinator. So he'd start calling plays on both sides of the ball. That's not happening now. Kirby's not calling the offense. He's got to hire someone that's very good at their job. That's not an insult.
Part of being an elite coach.
Like if Notre Dame wins if Notre Dame wins a title this year, you're going to hear me praise Mike Denbrock, or even if they have another great season, praise Mike Denbrock, praise Chris Ash, praise Mike Mickens, who's the best DB coach in the business, praise Al Washington and Joe Rudolph. That doesn't mean that Marcus Freeman's not a good head coach. He's the one who hired him.
Exactly.
But it's also, you can acknowledge that played a big role in their success, is that they hired him. And I just think it's funny that people like take that as an insult. Like when you say like, well, he won because he had great assistants. And it's like, well, what are you trying to say? That he's a smart coach who hires good assistants? Like, I don't understand why you're taking this as an insult. Like, that's just a fact. You look at what Georgia's offense looked like before Todd Monken, and you look at what it's looked like since Todd Monken. It should be pretty easy to us.
Brian, Tyler's sitting there kind of smiling right now, and our listeners are too. They know this, that a love language of mine absolutely is talking about coordinators and how important of a role they truly do play in championships and program success. And so let's get the pads popping, man, and switch to the other side of the ball. The Irish had one of the best defenses in the country last year. Speaking of coordinators, they lost stud defensive coordinator Al Golden to the Cincinnati Bengals. He's gone to the NFL. But then Marcus Freeman goes out and hires Chris Ash. And when that hire was first made, I texted Tyler immediately and said, dude, I really like this hire. He's been in the NFL for the last few years, but he's certainly not a stranger to the college game. He helped Wisconsin win back-to-back Big Ten championships as a DC under Brett Bielema. He was a DC at Ohio State under Urban Meyer. And as we know, Urban Meyer, when he was coaching, Nick Saban, when he coached, Kirby Smart too, like they don't hire idiots to be their coordinators.
And when they do, they fire him quickly.
Exactly. He was there.
Not with Chris Ash.
Right. Chris Ash was the DC there in 2014 when the Buckeyes won the Natty. They was the DC there in 2015 when they had the second best defense in the country. He had a stint as a head coach at Rutgers. Didn't go well, but okay, like it's Rutgers. Everything's going on there. But still, that's nothing to do with him actually calling a defense and being a defensive coordinator. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the hire of Chris Ash?
And can we also say, you might not agree with this, Lance, because you're an Alabama fan, and I don't. You just because you saw that. I'm not saying that like you're going to be a homer, but you've watched that team more. I said, with the exception of one bad day in November against Michigan State, that 15 Ohio State team was the best team.
They were so good, man.
Outside of that one bad day, that team was unbelievably good. And I saw them up close and personal in the Fiesta Bowl, unfortunately, that year. So that was an unbelievably good team, except for one.
Brian, when we talk about if that.
Urban had a lot of those.
But when you talk about the 14 playoff, and if they would have had a little bit of an extended playoff, if certain teams would have gotten in, what they could have done, that Ohio State team with Zeke Elliott and that bunch that year was even better than the team in the previous year.
Yeah. Oh, I agree completely. I absolutely agree completely. Yeah, 14 playoff, Urban would have had a second title, most likely in a 14 playoff. A 12-team playoff. But look, I'm a little bit unsure of Chris Ash, and because I try to look at things objectively and say there's a lot of good. You said a lot of good things. What we left out was the really bad defense he had at 13 in Arkansas, the really bad defense he had at 2020 at Texas, his last D coordinator job. Now, the spin, and I think it's a legitimate spin. Sometimes spin is honest. It was his first year at Texas. It was the COVID year, so they had no offseason, no way of installing the defense. I mean, there's a lot of teams that have abnormally bad years that year. Go look at Michigan and what they were that year and then what they became. So there's a lot of, I don't really care about what he did at Rutgers. Not everybody's meant to be head coach. And we've seen great coordinators. Like, is Steve Spurrier not a great coach because he failed in the NFL? No, he's a great college head football coach. Some guys are just elite at certain levels. So I try to be open-minded, but two things that kind of stood out for me. Number one is Marcus Freeman. That's the side of the ball you kind of think he's going to have the best, track record of hires, since that's his expertise, right? And like if I'm debating an offensive lineman evaluation with an offensive line coach, I'm going to probably hey, I have my opinion, but I'm going to listen to you. If Harry Heastan calls me up and says, hey man, I think your eval on this kid was wrong, I'm going to rewatch the kid's film and with an open mind because Coach Heastan told me to. So I there's a level of trust there. And some of the things that I had concerns with, how he interacts with players, some of the things I've heard from his time at Ohio State and Rutgers, as far as how he interacts with players, I look and say, I don't know how well it's going to fly with two things: the modern athlete, even that's changed from 5-10 years ago, but also the Notre Dame student athlete. Because this is a different type of kid. I don't mean that insulting way. They're better than everybody else. It's just different. You're getting a different type of player that I don't think you can just do the MF this, MF that, and, type of thing. So what I saw this spring, I was very kind of keeping my eye out for that. And we only got like 3-4 practices this spring, but one of the things I saw was how he interacted was very different from how I had heard about it. And then you look at the way they were teaching. I'm a big believer that you start with the foundation, you get perfect at that, then you start building stuff onto it. Al Golden was just like, hey, we're going to throw everything at you. You're going to have the whole playbook in a week, and then we'll have to figure it out. And they both work. I have my personal preference. Chris Ash is doing it kind of the way that I did it. So obviously that's going to kind of speak my language a little bit. And then just hearing some things from people inside the program that have always been honest with me and have told me when things aren't great, they back up what I'm hearing from other sources, talking to parents who of players on defense who have always been very honest with me, tell me good and tell me bad. Their kid comes home raving about how he interacts with them. So I think some of the successes and failures, plus his time in the NFL, dealing with more of a, I don't want to say Notre Dame type of athlete, but I mean, the reality is Notre Dame athletes are kind of have to be more like professional athletes because of all the rigors and demands on them that are unique to other places. They have to be more organized and disciplined and things like that because they have to go to class. They have to take real majors. They have to do certain things. And that's why you have so many Notre Dame players graduating in 3 years with sometimes 2 degrees. And it's just a different type of deal where I think he's adapted to that and altered a little bit, and it's been very well received. Now let's see how it goes when we get into the fall and we're a little bit closer to when the things matter a little bit more. But so far so good. But at the end of the day, guys, how will he design a game plan? How will he call games against modern offenses? That I don't know. That's the big unknown, and that's the thing that gives me a little bit of pause, just because I know what Al Golden was going to do, good and bad. You knew what to expect. How much is Chris Ash going to alter how they play coverage-wise? Is he going to still do a lot of man? Is he going to bring in more zone? I know they're going to play more zone than last year, but how much more zone? Are you going to completely go away from what has worked so that you can do what you like, or are you going to alter and adjust to fit the personnel you have? Those are all unknowns, and they can tell me till they're blue in the face, this is what we're going to do. But until you're, facing those live bullets and in a real situation, I coached football 7 years in college, man, lower level, but game plans look great until you get into a game and you realize, well, they're not doing the third down coverage we thought they were going to do. We got to figure something out, and that's when we're going to really find out. But so far, so good for Chris Ash. I'm just someone, when it comes to the coaches like that, I just need to see it. And that's how I was about Al Golden. Like, that guy hadn't been a coordinator, if you really think about it, since 2005 at UVA. He'd been a head coach, but he wasn't a coordinator at Temple. He wasn't a coordinator at Miami. He wasn't a coordinator in the NFL. How's he going to do? And he did great. First year was a getting acclimated period for him and the players. Year 2 was excellent. Year 3 was excellent. How is Chris Ash going to be? I don't know. I'm encouraged by what I've seen so far. Now let's see what happens when we get to game days.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to get tested game 1 against, one of top 10 offense coordinators in our mind, Shannon Dawson and Carson Beck, and that high-powered Miami offense. But let's talk front 7 here, defensive line and linebackers. all the injuries last year, I mean, the one good thing you can see coming of it is that guys like Bryce Young, Gabriel Rubio, they got some really good experience, especially in that playoff game. Now you have guys immersing themselves back into the lineups. Obviously, Boubacar Traore, Jordan Botelho at some point mid-season, after his injury. Depth pieces like, JT, gosh, what's his name? JT Tuihalamaka. Yeah. Joshua Burnham
on that one too.
Yeah. Donovan Heinisch. I mean, really good depth there at the D line, and then linebackers obviously losing guys, like Jack Kaiser, who was Mr. Notre Dame himself. But still, Drake Bowen is leading the group. You got Jalen Sneed, Jaden Osbury, KVA, Kingston Viliamuasa is a guy that is just an absolute stud in my mind. And then I think true freshman Madden Faramu is going to play. I think he's going to push for a lot of good playing time.
It'll be hard to keep off the field, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think just, again, it goes back to our original point of like just the depth that they've stacked at a lot of these key pieces where 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when we're playing, Notre Alabama in the national championship game, you don't have depth in the trenches. You don't have guys in the trenches like
5 years ago when they were playing Alabama in the Rose Bowl. You didn't have guys like this in the front seven. Absolutely right.
So give us your thoughts on the front seven in Notre Dame and how impactful they're going to be for that defense.
Well, there's a lot of talent, and I use the word potential a lot with the defensive line, and I always say this: potential is an awesome word to use in the offseason. It's the word you hate to use in the season. You want to be using another P word in the season, production.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big question mark is, can this unit produce on a consistent level? And you could say, well, hey, look, this is the unit you had basically against Penn State, Georgia, and Ohio State. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But the D-line didn't exactly light the world on fire against Penn State and Ohio State either. They did against Georgia. But we can also be honest and say a lot of defensive lines did really well against Georgia's offensive line last year. It was a struggle. But there's a talent there. I mean, Josh Burnham is a guy that's very talented that not a lot of people talk about, who, tied for second on the team in tackles for loss, despite also missing a couple games last year with an injury. He got hurt against Northern Illinois and didn't come back until the Stanford game. Just another one of the many issues. Jason Onye is a guy to keep an eye on, who had a monster spring this year, a monster spring that last year. And if you look at the first 5 games of the season in 2024, you could argue Jason Onye was their best defensive tackle for stretches of those games. And then, of course, he has to lead the team, and they don't have him either. So your top 2 defensive tackles through the first 5 games you did not have in your last 3 games last year, because obviously Riley Mills went down. And then, of course, Howard Cross did not play to the level that he did the year before. And then you get Jared Dawson out of the portal, who was a very good player for Louisville last year as a pass rusher. Hopefully he can kind of help replace some of that pass rushing ability that Riley and Howard brought to the table. You're going to be different in the middle this year. It's a much bigger D-line that's this season. I mean, Jason Onye's over 305, Gabriel Rubio's 319, Jared Dawson's 300 pounds. Armel Mukam is a young kid to keep an eye on. Super high ceiling. I was talking with somebody around the program who said they were in the spring, and a longtime NFL D-line coach was there, and he said, hey, you got a future NFL player up there that not a lot of people are talking about. And the person said, hey, you talking about Bryce Young? He goes, with all due respect, people are talking about the son of the Hall of Famer. He talked about Armel Mukam. He's like, that kid's got NFL talent. Well, now he's got to turn it into actual production. And that's the thing, is it looks great on paper, but now they got to step up and play. And when we know what Donovan Heinisch can do, I think he showed last year, like, okay, you're going to be a good pass rusher. But can that unit be more consistent? Can they produce enough in the big moments? Can Boubacar stay healthy? He was banged up a lot in high school as well. Part of the reason he didn't have a rankings jump as a senior is because he was banged up a lot of his senior year. Can he stay healthy? Can Bryce Young take that next step to go from being kind of a raw, flashy kid to a consistent playmaker? That's a question. Ken Logan Thomas is another guy I tell you to keep an eye on, who was a kid that ran I think he ran like a 10.5 in high school as a defensive end. And he was on the field on that last play against Georgia. They trusted him enough as a 205-pound true freshman to put him on the field on 4th down against Georgia last year. He's an elite athlete. And so there's a lot of talent there. It's just, can they put it together and play to that potential? And I think that's going to determine how good the defense is going to be. Linebacker room is one of the 3 or 4 best in the country. I don't care what anybody says. And if you don't think Notre Dame's got speed, go watch the Georgia game, because you watch Georgia's linebackers who are elite. And then you watch Notre Dame's linebackers, and you're like, okay, Georgia's are clearly more experienced, but they don't – I mean, that Notre Dame linebacker core can run with anybody. And Georgia's running backs found that out last year. Their quarterback found that out last year. Like, hey, I think I got the edge. No, I don't. And that one thing they can do is run. And there's a kid at middle linebacker named Bodie Cahoon, who, if it wasn't for the depth they have now, he's a 6'2", 235-pound kid who's running the 4.5s. And he's at best going to be their third string middle linebacker this year, at best. And this is a kid who, as a junior in high school, is playing safety. But like that, it's just a different animal. Secondary is going to be elite again. The question is, in football, at the end of the day, why did Ohio State beat Notre Dame? Did they have better athletes? In some places, yes. In some places, no. They beat Notre Dame in the trenches on both sides of the ball. That's ultimately what led them. Well, yeah, but the throw did. But if it wasn't for them getting beat in the trenches, they're not at the point where that throw does that for them. They're hoping to hit that throw to get a lead or to get back in the game. They beat Notre Dame in the trenches. Penn State, for at least the first half, beat Notre Dame in the trenches. Now, Notre Dame countered in the second half and then won that battle in the second half, and that's when the athletes took over. But in the first half, Notre Dame was down 10-3 because Penn State whooped them in the trenches. That's got to get – and both sides of the ball. And that's got to change. But how crazy is it, guys, that we're talking about, well, we know Notre Dame has the athletes, but is their lines going to be good enough? Used to be, well, we know their lines are good enough, but do they have the athletes? And I think that's why – there's such optimism in South Bend this year, because it's like, dude, we made the run. We, looking at it from like the team standpoint, we made the run we did last year without our stud 5-star left tackle, without our starting center by the middle of the third game, without our starting Viper, without our backup Viper, who was producing on a level where if he would have taken the production he had through 4 games and played a whole season as an 11 sack, 50 something plus pressure guy, which is like creeping up on Abdul Carter numbers, without Jason Onye after 5 games, without, certain guys, secondary Benjamin Morrison after 6 games. It's like, what are they going to do now that you get all those guys back? Plus some young guys are now stepping up and emerging. And they did that with Notre Dame as a very young team last year also. I think people forget that because they had some really old guys. Howard Cross is a 6th year, Jack Kaiser's a 6th year, Xavier's a 5th, Riley's a 5th. But it was like 5th and 6th, and then a bunch of 1s and 2s, freshmen, sophomores, redshirt freshmen. And now all those guys are back with tons of experience under their belt. And the hope is that they'll take their games to another levels this year. And as long as the development is what it's been, you expect that to happen. And for this defense to still be really good. But it's going to come down to, can the D-line turn their potential into production? That's going to be the question.
Yeah, Brian, you briefly mentioned the secondary a second ago. Speaking of athletes and speed on the field and experience, I mean, this one of the best secondaries in the country coming back this year with Leonard Moore and Christian Gray at the corners, Adon Schuler at safety. But who do you think is going to get the nod at strong safety between Luke Talek and Jalen Stroman? And do you think that the guy from my alma mater that transferred in, who, by the way, his mentality is a dog, Devontae Smith, do you think he's going to get the nod at nickel in the secondary? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's the easier one. Like, Devontae looked really good in the spring.
He plays with an edge, man.
I don't remember watching. He does. And it's such a great story, too. He's a young man that has a child. He wants to be closer to home, which he thinks is going to be better for his kid. He didn't leave Alabama because he hated Alabama and didn't get along with the coaches and all that. He made a decision as a father, and part of it was football, but he made a life decision. It's like, how do you not respect a young man like that, especially in today's age, when it's just easier to just not care about your kid and put you first? And he did that. And luckily, he had a great relationship with Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens when they recruited him at Cincinnati, because he's an Ohio kid. But, I remember watching the Georgia game, and first play of the game, Georgia goes right at him. Boom, beats him on a slant route for 15 yards. And then they kept trying to go at him, and you're like, you guys may want to stop doing that because it's not going real well. You got him once, and he was excellent after that. Just breaking down his film, because I remember seeing him in high school, and I liked him in high school, but I didn't love him. I didn't know that he was – when Bama got him, I was like, well, that's an interesting pickup because that guy's film doesn't really blow me away. And he didn't do a whole lot for his first couple of years, but when you look at him kind of getting into that nickel spot, he just looks so comfortable there. And it's just like he was built to play the nickel. And he looked that way in the spring, just natural, smooth, really easy change of direction. He's physical when he needs to be. He can cover. And he looked great this spring. So he's got that one, in my opinion, locked down. The question at nickel is going to be, who are they going to groom to be his replacement? Kind of like quarterback. They don't want to have to keep going back to the portal for nickels. This is the 3rd year in a row they've gone to the portal for nickel. Got Jordan Clark last year, Thomas Harper the year before that. So that's more of the question, is who's going to be after him. So who's going to be the depth guy? They like to rotate, things like that. Strong safety, or it's not really strong. It's the boundary. It's the field safety position. And it's obviously Luke Talich is in the conversation. Jalen Stroman. There's a redshirt freshman named Bronte Johnson from Fort Wayne, who's an absolute dude, great athlete. He had a great spring. They got a true freshman named Jadon Blair from North Carolina that's 6'5", over 210 pounds. He was getting first-team reps in the spring as well. They're absolutely loaded there. And to me, that's when I stopped worrying about a position. Like, I don't have to know who the guy is going to be, but what happened at Notre Dame, and Tyler, it sounds like you've watched a lot of Notre Dame football over the years. It would be where all your hopes and dreams are being put on one guy. And you had that one guy at a position. If he pans out, they're going to be okay. But if he doesn't, they're in trouble. And what's different about this Notre Dame team is, well, what if Jalen Stroman's not as good as you hoped he was coming from Virginia Tech? All right, fine. They've got Luke Talich. Well, what if okay, you got Bronte Johnson. You got one of them at least is going to be good. Whereas in the past, it was like you had that one guy, he better stay healthy and he better pan out. Otherwise, you're in trouble. I mean, just as recently as 2022 and 2023, they had Lorenzo Styles and Jaden Thomas. Like, if he pans out a receiver, they're going to be okay. But if he doesn't, you're in trouble. And that's what makes me just say, I don't know who's going to start. Mike Mickens likes to play rotation. They're going to play at least 2 or 3 of those guys. And over time, you expect them to produce. Because why do I think that? Because that's the track record of Mike Mickens. It's like when you watch Alabama under Nick Saban, you don't really care who starts in the secondary, because you just know in order to start in Nick Saban's secondary, you got to be pretty good, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. And that's kind of what it's got to at Notre Dame. Well, you lose Cam Hart and you replace him with Christian Gray. You lose Benjamin Morrison and you replace him with Leonard Moore. That's just kind of what Notre Dame has done under Mike Mickens. You lose Kyle Hamilton the next year. Hello world. Here's Xavier Watts. I mean, that's just kind of what it's been like under Mike Mickens. And when you've established that track record, you just kind of don't worry about it as much, especially when there's depth of talent, because that's so key in college football. It always has been, but especially now when you've got to win 15, 16 games, win a title. If you don't have depth of talent, not just depth, because everybody's got a 3 deep, but how good is your 3 deep? And that's what's changed with Notre Dame is they can have that depth of talent and say, I don't really care who starts, because if you're going to start, it means you had to be pretty good. Same thing at quarterback. Yeah. You're not hanging on your hopes and dreams on CJ Carr the way you were Tyler Buckner and then Phil Dracovic before him, because it's not like, well, if they don't pan out, you're going to Drew Pine. It's like, if he doesn't pan out or gets hurt, okay, you got to turn to Kenny Minchie. Oh boy, that stinks. How are you ever going to survive with a big-armed, athletic quarterback going into 3rd year? Woe is Notre Dame, So that's what's different about Marcus Freeman's tenure than what we've seen really since Lou Holtz was here.
You are correct. I have watched a lot of Notre Dame football, and as long as the secondary doesn't pull a Gary Gray against Roy Roundtree in Michigan back in the day and not turn around and look for the ball every pass, then I think they'll be just fine.
I thought it was Jeremy Gallon.
Yeah, I think they'll be
I was there
fine
for that game. That was one of the, I'll say this, as a Notre Dame fan, it sucked, but it was one of the coolest experiences I've ever seen, because when they started that drive, I mean, Michigan fans are already kind of leaving because there's less than a minute left. They're backed up. They ran that wheel route, and it was dead silent except for like the couple thousand Notre Dame fans up in the upper deck. About halfway through the ball in the air, the crowd realizes Jeremy Gallon's wide open. And you hear this slow crescendo of noise, and the minute it hits his hand, that place went absolutely bonkers. And as a college football fan, it sucked as a Notre Dame fan, but it was a pretty cool experience as a football fan to just see a place, 100,000 people like in unison, and then just erupt. But that was a tough one. But here's the thing, though, Tyler. Who were they going to put in if Gary Gray didn't work out?
Exactly. That's my point.
That's
right?
The difference now.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now it's like, okay, he's not playing well, put in this guy or that guy. If you're, I guess you're going to have to put in Dallas Golden, who's a stud freshman in there, I guess. I guess you're going to have to put on Indiana's Mr. Football, Mark Zachary, in there. Woe is Notre Dame. I think that's what's different. But to your point, you've got to hope that they avoid those things. And I'll ask you, are you more confident that happens now after what we've seen the last couple of years from Notre Dame? I mean, I obviously, as someone who talks about it every day, I see it, but you also talk a lot about non-Notre Dame stuff. You
Yeah.
tell me, are you more confident that those things are going to work out based on what we've seen?
Absolutely. I can't believe we've gone this far in the show without bringing up, the previous coach's name and how, just the recruiting track record has improved so much since Marcus Freeman has been there. And obviously, he goes down to LSU and you can get any player you want down at LSU, right? I mean, that's easy. Lance is laughing because he knows I'm talking about my favorite guy. So yeah, I mean, it's noticeable, and to anybody, it is just it's continually funny because it was there all along. You just needed to figure out a way to tap into, and I can see the look on your face right now. You needed someone to tap into and actually want to recruit these types of players to Notre Dame, and it seemed like BK never wanted to do that.
I caught a lot of heat and venom and anger from Notre Dame fans for years for my takes on Brian Kelly, because I'm not hey, I'm going to tell you you're pretty when you're not, and I'm not going to tell you you're good at your job when you're giving me mediocre production. I'm just not. I want to be able to lay my head on the pillow at night and know that I was honest with people. I may be wrong, but I'm going to be wrong giving you my honest opinion. And when he left the way he did and Notre Dame fans kind of turned on him, it worked out great for me because my business exploded. Do you know why? Because that's when everybody else started saying the same things I had been saying for years and got hate for. And they're like, well, maybe he was right all along. Now, some people are still mad at me because it's like they can't put two and two together. Like, I grew to hate him, but even though he's right, I still hate him. But it is what it is. But it was so frustrating. I'll tell you a story. I was talking to a Notre Dame coach who's no longer at Notre Dame, and they were recruiting a receiver named Jalen McMillan. I know you guys have heard of him. Yeah. Pretty good wide receiver. And he was leading towards Notre Dame early, and then Washington was just putting on the charm. He ends up committing to Washington. Well, a couple Notre Dame coaches were still going after him, and they were on the verge of flipping him. They really felt they could flip him, and they just kept going to Coach Kelly. Hey, we really need your help with getting us over the finish line. And he said, okay, I'll call him. I mean, we just never would. Eventually, this coach goes in there. He's like, Coach, man, I'm on the verge of getting this kid to flip. I need you to help me get over the finish line. He goes, listen, I'm not going to deal with this because I shouldn't have to beg a kid to come to Notre Dame. And you're like, are you flipping serious? It's not about begging. It's about, I don't know, doing your job.
Building relationships.
And it's like when he did the yes, and when he was doing his national search for a new offensive coordinator, I told him, I was like, he's not gonna. Do you know the other two coaches that wanted that job? Do you know who they were when he hired Tommy Rees? Joe Moorhead and Todd Monken, because Todd Monken had coached with him at Grand Valley State. And he was interested in the job. He was looking about getting back into college football. Kelly's like, nah, we're going to hire Tommy Rees. And I like Tommy Rees. I think Tommy Rees is a wicked smart guy. And he's been proven to be so since Nick Saban hired him and he got hired in the NFL. Like, Tommy's a really smart guy. But with all due respect, back then, Todd Monken would have been the better hire. Joe Moore would have been the better hire at the time. But he was gonna take the easy route, the person he could control. And it was just that way all the time. He'd always talk about, well, we can't get those kind of guys. Well, how do you know? You didn't try to get that kind of guy. And then you go out and hire guys like Brian Van Gorder and Dale Alexander, who can't coach, can't recruit. And then you wonder why you're not getting kids. And it just was so frustrating in the whole shopping down a different aisle. And he had I was like, if you'd have spent as much time actually trying to do this as you do trying to convince people that you can't do this at Notre Dame, then maybe you might have won more games. And the thing I've always said is Charlie Weiss proved this at Notre Dame. If you work at recruiting and you're a good salesman and you know how to sell that school, you can recruit there. Say whatever you want about Charlie Weiss as a coach. The one thing Charlie Weiss could do is recruit. Mm-hmm. And people forget the 2012 team was 80-something% Charlie Weiss's recruits. And this is a guy that went 8-5 with that same players. Think about this. Notre Dame went 8-5 with Zach Martin, Michael Floyd, Tyler Eifert, Manti Te'o, Stephon Tuitt, Harrison Smith, Robert Blanton, Gary Gray, Capron Lewis-Moore, Lewis Nix, TJ Jones, Theo Riddick, and Sierra Wood. And Matthias Farley, who started for the Colts, couldn't even get on the field for Notre Dame as a starter in multiple years. And you went 8-5 with that team. But I'm supposed to believe that a roster that had over 20 kids that played in the NFL that were actually playing on the team, not on the roster, like a freshman who never played and eventually became a stud. I'm talking about played in the rotation that year, over 20. Jonas Gray, who had a 200-yard rushing game for the Patriots, was not even a starting running back on that team. And I'm supposed to believe that that was an 8-5 team, talent-wise, or maybe that was an 8-5 coaching staff. And that's what was so frustrating is watching those teams that like that 2015 team and the talent they had on that team.
Yeah.
And you're just like, how is this team always losing big games?
Yeah.
And it was so maddening. And then like when I was finally officially done with Kelly, I was kind of always done with him. But when he started talking about, well, we didn't lose to Clemson as bad as Alabama did, I was like, I'm freaking done with you. Like when you're at Notre Dame, dude, when that's your claim where you're trying to pump up your program as well, we didn't lose as bad. And it was 27-28. It wasn't even like you lost by a field goal and they blew Alabama out. It was they lost by 28. You lost by 27. This isn't the flex you think it is, cuz. Like, I mean, it was so maddening because you knew the potential that this program had. You just needed somebody that believed that Notre Dame was something special, and you needed a coach that could unlock that, which is true for every big-time school. I mean, people say about Nick Saban, well, of course he won a bunch of championships. He was at Alabama, and I'm like, well, if it was so easy, why didn't Dennis Francione do it, or Mike Price, or Mike DeBoard, or Mike Shula, or even Gene Stallings, who won a title? One title. It's like, no, it's not easy. You had someone that believed that you could be successful there. Certainly there were certain elements that went his way, but then he worked like a dog at it, hired great coaches. If he made a mistake as a hire, which all coaches do, like Tosh as DC, you quickly fix it. And then you'd have a guy that brings in Brian Van Gorder, and by game 7 of year 1, it was obvious, this ain't the guy. And he didn't get rid of him until year 3 when the AD made him get rid of him because they blew a 14-0 lead to Duke at home. And that's what you had to deal with for all these years. So when you see now what they're doing, it's like, it's so refreshing because like this is what a real college football program looks like. And the thing that's different is Marcus Freeman doesn't make excuses. He doesn't make excuses for himself or his players. There's a standard here, and you're expected to live up to that standard. And if you don't, there's going to be things are going to happen. I don't mean like he's going to yell at you, but like, okay, you're not getting the job done. Yep. Next man up. Hey, that guy's injured. So what we're going to do? Forfeit the rest of the year? Next man up. So we lost to Northern Illinois. What are we going to do? Pack it in? And no, we're going to figure it out. We're going to be held to that same standard, and we're going to go out there and win the next week. And then that's what they do. There's no way if Brian Kelly's the head coach, that Notre Dame does what they did last year.
Yeah, and I think, obviously his 4th year at LSU, and, they lose another opener to Clemson, and things start snowballing. Those fans are going to find out real quick. But just to finish off here, record prediction for Notre Dame, it's tough to say just because, I mean, they lost to Northern Illinois last year. So it's tough really for anybody to go 12-0 in today's college football, especially with such a wide open season that we're heading into in 2025. But give us your, best prediction, expectations for this team. Obviously, see anything short of the college football playoff and hosting a first-round game, probably it would be not a successful season in their eyes. But just from your point of view, what are your expectations this year?
I haven't done an official prediction yet, and we'll do something like that as we get close to the season. But so far, I've kind of been like where I was last year. I think they're better than every team they're going to play, talent-wise. But being the better team doesn't always mean you win. Notre Dame had more talent than Northern Illinois, and that didn't work out real well. You know what I mean? And Alabama had more talent than Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. Georgia had more talent, in my opinion, than Ole Miss. I mean, you don't always beat a team that's got you have more talent than. It's hard to go undefeated. I mean, Oregon goes through and goes undefeated, and the closest games they had were Boise and Wisconsin. Were the 2 most competitive regular season games they had. It's hard to go undefeated, especially in today's era when you have so much roster turnover. So I kind of say, I haven't made my official one. Record-wise, I think 11-1 is kind of where you should be. Is you're going to have a game where you stub your toe. I think you need to be 10-2 is the floor for this football team. You worse than 10-2, something went wrong, and you've got to be back in the college football playoffs. And I think you got to win at least one game for me to say they're moving the needle. After that, it just depends on matchups and all those type of things. But like Oregon loses in the quarters last year. Well, let's be honest. There was only about 2 teams capable of beating them in the quarters, and it's Ohio State and Notre Dame. That's about it. I mean, maybe Texas. The draw can have a big impact on when you get knocked out. So I look at it and say you've got to at least get back to the quarters. But you want to tell me you're moving the needle forward? It's semis again, minimum semis. I don't think it's like if you don't get back to the title game every year, you're a failure. I'm not one of those guys. It's like, are you showing me that this program is still moving forward? That's what I want to see. And of course, the standard Notre Dame is a championship, but there's a difference between like not reaching the ultimate standard and saying, okay, but did you get the most out of this football team? Those are 2 different conversations to have. And that's what you need to do at the end of the year. Like, hey, they're still moving forward. What you can't do is what we saw past, which is after 2012, they go 9-4. Yep. And then after 2018, they go 11-2, and it was one of the ugliest 11-2 seasons you'll ever see. They played 3 ranked teams. They beat one of them. That was Navy. They got beat by Georgia and got slaughtered by Michigan, and then didn't play another ranked team the rest of the year and beat Iowa State in a bowl game. Who cares? But they were not that team at 10-2 would not have made the playoff if you go back and look at the rankings, like a 12-team playoff. If you go back and look at the rankings, because everybody knew that's a fraudulent team. They blew out bad teams and looked ugly, beating Virginia Tech, looked ugly losing to Georgia, who played the entire game without their starting 2 corners and all these different things. And it was never, hey, let's build on what we just did. And that's what we need to see that Marcus Freeman can do. I think he can do it, but right now we're still in thinking and hoping as opposed to we know because he just hasn't done it yet. So if you want to feel good about it, well, he's gotten better every year. Well, there's only one way to get better in year 4 than last year. But I don't know that's obviously they're capable of winning a championship. I said I think there's 6 or 7 teams capable of winning a championship this year, and based on what we know today, and I think Notre Dame's one of those teams.
Okay. Bryan, can't thank you enough, man, for hopping on. I know there's going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans listening to this. Let them know where they can find your stuff.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at CoachD178, and we always put our stuff there. But if you are a YouTube watcher, go to type in Irish Breakdown. You see the name there behind me, kind of backwards a little bit, but Irish, like the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Breakdown, because that's what we do. We break things down, and we do things a little bit different. You can subscribe to us there. And then also, anywhere you listen to podcasts, type in Irish Breakdown. You can subscribe to our channel there. We also talk about non-Notre Dame things. I enjoy talking college football. That's why I wanted to come on with you guys. And we did our top 10 offensive lines on Thursday. We did our top quarterbacks breakdown, top running backs breakdown. I think this week we're going to be talking about top offenses. I think in college football this week, I think is what's on our radar. So we like talking about all of it because how can you know how good Notre Dame is if you don't know how good everybody else is? And so you can find us there at Irish Breakdown. I try to make it easy, right? You want to go to our website, irishbreakdown.com. You want to go to our message board, boards.irishbreakdown.com. I try to make it easy, guys, because I'm not that smart. So if I can figure it out, then I think everybody else can figure it out.
That's a good point, man. Yeah, we'd love to have you back on just to talk ball in general, but we appreciate this as a Notre Dame preview for the 2025 season. As always, guys, catch us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Check us out on our socials on X, Instagram, and TikTok. For Bryan Driskell and Lance Barton, I'm Tyler Noe. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time.